Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Clark from the Center for Weight Loss Success. And today, I'm going to give you a little talk about some of my thoughts about weight loss, but also some of my thoughts about optimizing health in the long term. And my concept of all of this really has evolved over a number of years. And this information, this discussion is really pertinent for anybody looking to improve their health, looking to lose weight. Doesn't matter whether you've had weight loss surgery or didn't have weight loss surgery. As you know, I am a surgeon. I do weight loss surgery. So yes, we see a lot of those people, but this doesn't just pertain to them. Or to you. This can pertain really to anyone. And hopefully this discussion will help many people. And there'll probably be some musings going on in all this and my thoughts on this. And I guess I ought to quit rambling and just kind of get into this whole thing here. So we're talking about optimizing health, optimizing weight loss. Okay. And it's a new year. So all of us usually have that kind of somewhere in our things to do this year, right? All right. So just a little introduction then. The essence of any weight loss plan, or really any health plan, is going to have to be changing behavior modification. If we don't change our behavior, then literally nothing will change in our life. We have to do the changing. It can't be that we're waiting for everybody else to change for us and that'll change our life. That just doesn't work very well. So we have to change behavior. And that doesn't mean it doesn't matter whether we're trying to improve health or whether we're trying to lose weight, but really no matter what we're trying to do. So the bottom line to this is change is not going to occur unless you change your behavior. And it really is up to you. No matter how we look at it, it's still a personal responsibility. And that's true for me, it's true for everyone. All right, so a little overview, and I'll also call this the oversimplification of the whole thing, but this is kind of what we're going to be talking about, the themes of this discussion here, is that controlling weight and really controlling health, I become convinced, is controlling insulin levels. If we control insulin levels, we control weight, we control health. Now, insulin's a hormone. Its main function is to control your blood sugars. So if blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up to help keep our blood sugars well controlled. But insulin also causes a lot of other potential problems. Insulin causes you to retain water. It increases blood pressure. It can increase cholesterol and triglycerides, which subsequently increase heart risk. It can increase inflammation, which subsequently increase heart risk. So just overall, it can increase heart risk. It also turns on fat storage. And this is the key to weight, though, is that so if insulin does all of these things that we wish it didn't do, and if we can control insulin, we can control weight and we can control health. Okay? So the real question to answer then is, how do you control insulin? What are the ways to control insulin? Keep insulin levels as low as possible. So it's a hormone you can't live without. The insulin number of 0 is always bad. Okay? But you want to keep the numbers low as possible. Okay? Now, the main reason I say, and I'm going to digress here for a minute, is that when I say insulin is a hormone you can't live without, is obviously we don't remember back. And if you look back 100 years ago, before insulin was available as a medication, right? Type 1 diabetics. Type 1 diabetics make no insulin. And type 1 diabetes, back before insulin was available, was pretty much a death sentence because it was a slowly wasting disease. Is that we could control blood sugar somewhat by getting rid of anything that would raise blood sugar. So keeping calories fairly low, keeping carbohydrate really low, next to nothing, just a modest amount of protein. And so subsequently, then we could actually control the sugars okay without any insulin. Not well, but without any insulin, you cannot store fat. And so subsequently, then people with type 1 diabetes, they didn't make insulin, is that they'd just be losing weight, losing weight, losing weight, losing weight, because you can't actually store fat without insulin. So again, insulin's a hormone you don't want zero. That's kind of almost a death sentence. But nowadays we can give you insulin. Okay, but back 100 years ago, that wasn't true. It was pretty much a death sentence, a slow death sentence potentially, but still it was a wasting disease because you cannot store fat. As soon as we developed insulin, you could give people insulin, is that, hey, they actually then could store fat again, and it would no longer be this wasting disease. All right, so that's kind of historical on this. So a hormone we cannot live without. Zero is a bad number, but you actually do want to have kind of the smallest number possible, because insulin tends to cause so many other problems. All right, I think I spent enough time there. All right, so again, kind of controlling or going along this overview still, and the oversimplification is that, so controlling weight and really controlling health is controlling insulin levels. All right, so the real question is, okay, how do you control insulin levels? Now, I've listed 4 ways here, but there's actually a couple other ways that I'm not going to get into too much, but they are important. Okay, the other ways that controlling insulin levels is you also need to control stress and need to get quality sleep. Because when we're high stressed and we have very poor sleep quality, cortisol levels go up. Cortisol is a chronic stress hormone. When chronic stress hormones go up, we have higher insulin levels. So cortisol turns on higher insulin levels. So an important concept does need to be, and I'm not getting into this side of it, of quality sleep and controlling stress. And that's where, okay, deep breathing, taking for a walk, exercise to control stress, warm bath, whatever. Okay, getting that quality sleep. So that's important. But outside of that, okay, there are 4 main ways of controlling insulin. Low calorie works. You take your calorie low enough, insulin levels will fall, even if you're eating all carbohydrate. And literally, your insulin levels will come down if you take calories low enough. Okay, the issue there is when we take calories too low, over time, your metabolism is going to slow significantly. So yes, you can improve health by you can lower insulin levels, but it's not actually just cutting calories way down isn't by itself typically isn't a doable long-term thing, and it may not lead to as much weight loss as we'd like, because we see metabolism actually slows too. All right, but it does work. Okay. Exercise can be very helpful, and really the more intense the exercise, the better it works. So that is where the high intensity interval training comes in, the weight training comes in, quick bursts of cardio, all this. So any type of exercise, so the more active you are, it will help control insulin levels. So anyone that's a type 2 diabetic, they absolutely should be exercising, whatever kind, walking, no matter what. The higher their activity, the better off they'll be. But exercise is very important in controlling insulin levels. All right, okay, what else works? Low carb. Low carbohydrate, which means taking your carbohydrate levels very low, is got to be the cornerstone of an eating plan to control insulin levels, because it's carbohydrate that truly influence insulin levels the most. Okay? So if you're going to ignore low carbohydrate, it's really hard, next to impossible, to control insulin levels. So low carbohydrate has to be kind of a cornerstone. And the real question for anyone, which I'll get into later, is how low is low? And okay, that's somewhat individual dependent. And then finally, of the 4 ways that work pretty darn well, what works the absolute best is intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting basically means not eating. Now, intermittent fasting works for lots of different reasons, but 2 of the main reasons it works is because it's both low calorie and it's low carbohydrate. So you kind of get that double whammy there. There are lots of other reasons it works too, which we could go into in a very lengthy discussion, and I have in previous discussions about intermittent fasting. I'm a fan. Look into it if you haven't, but we'll probably hit on it a little bit during this, but this really isn't discussion for that. But intermittent fasting works the absolute best of anything as far as controlling insulin levels. Okay, so then the question then comes with these things of how do you control insulin levels is how do you actually do it? Okay, how do you utilize, how do you implement these? Now, the exercise part, okay, that's one out of the four. So we're going to kind of, with this, is going to be sticking mainly with the diet part. You'll notice dietary stuff have 3 out of the 4 have to do with eating. So you can really say diet trumps everything else. So we still have to really work on our diet. And it's improving health, improving weight, is controlling insulin levels. Diet's still going to trump everything else. So we have to, so 3 out of the 4, low calorie, low carb, intermittent fasting. All right, so a mantra, if you want to call it, words to live by. Words to live by here. This is, if they want to write something down there in this whole discussion, write this down right here. Eat a small amount of good food slowly. Make that your mantra. Again, eat a small amount of good food slowly. If you do that, we typically will be eating healthier. Now, when I say good, that good doesn't necessarily mean it tastes good, like candy bar, Snickers bar. Yeah, it tastes good. Eat a small amount of good. Good really should say quality, but it doesn't flow off the tongue quite as well. So eat a small amount of quality. Eat a small amount of good food slowly. Okay, words to live by. Go back to that over and over and over. Tape it to your refrigerator door, or put it as your screensaver, or whatever. All right, now let's talk a little bit about what I call the concept of eating. The concept of eating, that's kind of the your overall thought process of eating needs to be, how little can I eat and be satisfied? Not, how much can I cram in there? The difference between those two statements, how little can I eat and be satisfied, or how much can I cram in there, is generally a good 20 to 25%. So we need to have that. How little can I eat and be satisfied? That's the mindset right there. All right, then we should actually start looking at what I'll call the pattern of eating. And the pattern of eating actually is the simplest things to change, because the pattern of, when we're eating is actually has nothing to do with what we're eating. What we're eating is going to be important, but the pattern of eating is actually the simplest to change, because that's black-white. It's yes, no. It's either we are eating or we're not eating. Okay? So changing the pattern. Now, I like to have, for people to have a good pattern of eating, but when I say a good pattern of eating, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a regular pattern, meaning that, okay, every couple hours I'm eating. It's like, well, that's never been shown to work well. The pattern of eating can actually be an irregular pattern. And if you think about it, throughout history, it typically has been an irregular pattern. But for any individual, it's kind of figuring out what pattern of eating works well for you. Okay? There probably are a very few minor number of individuals that eating every few hours works really well for them. I assure you, that's not my patient population. Because if they're eating every few hours, basically, they're really never lowering their insulin levels. But if you don't get high insulin levels, then you typically don't have a weight problem either. So that's pattern. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be a regular pattern. It can be an irregular pattern. And 40, 50 years ago, that was the norm. Typically when I grew up, okay, we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s, in that time frame, last century, okay, is the pattern of eating was this. It was typically 3 meals a day, and we generally had breakfast about 7 a.m., you had lunch about noon, you had dinner about 6. That was it. Okay, there weren't a whole lot of snacks because you didn't want to, quote, ruin your appetite, as if you could ruin an appetite. But so we typically ate 3 times a day. It wasn't a whole lot of snacking, and you had your meals and you cleaned your plate, that type of thing. But obesity and a lot of these other health problems were not nearly as prevalent. So that pattern of eating, but if you think about that, okay, did that seem like regular? There was only 5 or 6 hours between it, but that also meant there were 12 hours after that that dinner meal. Then there was about 12 or 13 hours before your next meal. So fasting typically was part of a normal eating pattern, even just 40, 50 years ago. Now, thousands of years ago, fasting was a huge part of it because food wasn't available. And so, yeah, you were lucky if you got 1 or 2 meals a day. You did fine with that. So fasting was part of everybody's pattern of eating. But a pattern of eating, again, is a good thing. And it's figuring out a pattern that's good for you. It does not have to necessarily be a regular pattern. An irregular pattern is okay. And it may work well for you. Other people, not so much. We often, from a surgery patients, we often kind of tell them, gee, you need to be, eating breakfast each day. Well, there is some rationale to that, but for long term, once people beyond the surgery and they've healed well, they're a year out from their surgery, there's no reason any further. And initially after surgery, you got to start eating early, and it's because you need to get your protein in, you need to get your hydration in, and it's really hard to do right after surgery. Long term, it's not hard to do. It's easy to do. And so then getting that pattern that works for you is a good thing. Whole, long term after surgery, or if you haven't had surgery, eating when you're not hungry is probably not such a great idea. And so, yeah, if you're not hungry, there's not a reason you have to eat. So skipping meals is actually okay. Now, the backup on that is if you just had surgery, then no, skipping meals isn't so okay. But long term, again, this is something a little different. So typically what I encourage people to think about, okay, those 3 meals, okay, and some people need a snack, other people don't. But if you think about it, though, again, what we're trying to do is control insulin levels. It doesn't matter what you eat. Anything you eat will make insulin levels go up. And it doesn't matter, we're talking about, even 0 carbohydrate. Eating some protein, even fat will make insulin levels go up a little bit. Protein actually can make insulin levels go up decently, not as much as carbohydrate, but still. Okay, if we're controlling insulin levels, so if you eat, your insulin level's going up, doesn't matter what you eat. But then you need to have times that the insulin levels go back down. And if the insulin levels go back down in between those meals. So if you're eating only every couple of hours, insulin levels never go back down. Okay, and so there is something to that pattern of eating, all right? And to just take that a step further, and before I quit harping on this part of the discussion, is that there is good evidence that the same size meal taking late in the evening versus early in the evening or kind of late afternoon or midday, anywhere in there, if you have that same meal late in the evening, the late in the evening meal will actually stimulate a much more dramatic insulin response. And a much more dramatic insulin response is going to turn on fat storage that much more. So literally the same meal, the same calories, just eaten at a different time can affect this significantly. And that's where, the Mediterranean diet, a lot of Mediterranean countries, they have their big meal in midday, early afternoon, and typically very light eating in the evening. In the U.S., we typically got that backwards, and then we're often having our heaviest meal and sometimes later into the evening. And if it really gets later into the evening, then it's like, okay, you're getting a much bigger insulin response, which again turns on fat storage and turns on all the other problems, that subsequently then you would have had the same meal, same calories, same meal earlier in the day. Okay, so I'm done harping on that. But I guess the point there being is that the pattern of eating is something we do need to figure out. And again, it's the simplest of change. I never really talked about that. Simplest of change, meaning that, again, you're either eating or you're not eating. And so to say, okay, I'm going to eat at this time, say I'm going to have lunch at 1 o'clock, then at 3:30, it's not time to eat. So if it's not time to eat, you're not eating. So it's a yes, no question, as opposed to, gee, I'm going to eat. And then it is kind of, whenever you make the decision to eat, then there are so many other decisions that have to be made. What is it you're going to eat? How much of it you're going to eat? What is it actually, the makeup of all this stuff? There's lots and lots of decisions that go along to once I decide to eat. So it's either the pattern of eating is a yes, no thing. It's black, it's white. There's no shades of gray of what is it we're going to eat and how much and exactly when. So it's either yes or no. Okay, simplest to change. Simple doesn't mean easy. Say that over and over. All right, so what should a meal then be? Okay, overall, kind of meal size should be small plate size. That's where we want to go. And that's true whether, long-term after surgery. I always tell people, meal, small plate size. But that's also true for any of us. We haven't had surgery. Small plate size. Okay, just by minimizing a good, a small amount of good food slowly. Okay, and the best food has no labels, meaning we've prepared it ourselves. Okay, so non-processed food. It's the processing that causes a lot of this problems. And typically those are the carbohydrate, the biggest ones, but lots of different things get processed. So try to avoid processed foods. Purchase it yourself, prepare it yourself. You're getting it out of the edges of the supermarket, so to speak. Okay, so the best food has no labels. So that's the concept of eating right there. All right, moving on. So then we got that concept of eating, pattern of eating. Then it's, well, what am I going to eat? Okay, there now is where we got lots of decision making and lots of shades of gray. Okay, but the basics for anyone's eating plan is really looking at three things: how many calories, how much protein, and then how much carbohydrate you'll be sensitive to. And what I mean by those three things, and notice I didn't say a whole lot about fat there, because fat will influence your calories, okay? But fat has also minimal influence on insulin, so that when people talk about low carb, high fat diet, yeah, that's that we're kind of saying the same things, because I don't recommend people be on high protein. High protein actually stimulates insulin levels significantly. So back to the calories part of the whole thing. So calories, protein, carbohydrate. The trick is figuring out the numbers. That's the trick. So from a calorie perspective, there's always a calorie ceiling, meaning if you go above a certain number of calories, even if you're eating all healthy stuff, all the best things in the world, if you go above a certain number of calories, and for every individual it'll be different, but if you go above it, you're not going to lose weight, or maybe be gaining weight. So there's always a calorie ceiling. And again, no matter what we eat, it will influence insulin levels somewhat. It's just carbohydrate does it the most. So there's always a calorie ceiling. Now, just because you stay below that calorie ceiling doesn't mean you'll lose weight. It just means you're not gaining weight. That's all. But there's always a calorie ceiling. Protein, well, we can't survive without it. Your body's utilizing it second to second, day to day for everything that's happening. From heart beating to breathing, digesting, talking, growing hair, doesn't matter. They all require enzyme systems. Enzymes are protein. If we don't take in enough protein each day or regularly, your body's going to steal what it needs. And it steals what it needs from your lean body mass or your muscle mass, which is bad, because if you're breaking down lean body mass, you're slowing your metabolism down, because our lean body mass really drives our overall metabolism. The more lean body mass you have, the higher your metabolism. Again, an oversimplification, because literally we think of lean body mass and muscle mass and say, well, how many calories does a pound of muscle burn? Well, it depends on how well trained it is, because elite athlete pound of muscle is burning calories like crazy. It's the world-class swimmers, the world-class athletes they're burning calories like crazy. They can eat 7,000-8,000 calories a day. That's because well-trained muscle burns calories like crazy. Couch potato muscle, not so much. Okay? So yes, muscle burns more calories than fat, no matter how you look at it. But couch potato muscle, not quite so much as the well-trained muscle. And so, you do want to keep your lean body mass. It really is what drives your overall metabolism. But there isn't a set number. It's like, this much muscle mass. It needs to be well-trained. The better trained the muscle mass, the higher metabolism is. All right, digress there in a different subject. Okay, then how much carbohydrate? I kind of alluded to this earlier. Everyone has a carbohydrate tipping point, meaning that at a certain level of carbohydrate, they're going to struggle. Why does that happen? Because at a certain level of carbohydrate, their insulin levels jump way up. And when insulin levels go up, you retain water, you store fat like crazy. And so subsequently then it turns on fat storage. If you turn on fat storage, well, you're not going to eat you're not going to lose weight, okay? And you turn on fat storage, typically you're going to be less healthy. So everyone has a tipping point. At a certain level, their insulin level is going to go up significantly. So everybody has a different tipping point, which you can figure it out. It's just not easy to do. So, but everybody has this certain tipping point that they struggle at. Now, the healthier the carbohydrates, the less processed, your tipping point will then be a little higher. If you're exercising like crazy, okay, your tipping point will be higher. If you're just not very sensitive, if you're not carbohydrate sensitive, which most of my patients are, literally 90% of them are, 95% of them probably, but there are about a third of the population out there really isn't so carbohydrate sensitive, and they can eat plenty of carbohydrate and they don't gain weight. Now, why is that? They don't have a different physiology. They just have a more efficient physiology. They can actually eat a bunch of carbohydrate, and subsequently then it only takes tiny amounts of insulin to keep their blood sugars decent. If it only takes tiny amounts of insulin to keep your blood sugars decent, then you're not going to turn on fat storage, because insulin has to go up in order for it to turn on fat storage. So, but everybody has a tipping point. Right? All right. So, some things to chew on, okay? Just kind of, this is like a commercial break in the middle of this whole discussion. Okay, some things to chew on. Kind of working on weight loss will not work, I assure you of that. So if like, I'll cut back a little bit, I'll do a little bit more, and yeah, maybe it might help you a little bit, but it just doesn't work long term. You need to be all in, so to speak. All right, if you're only going to do one thing, if you were to sit down with me and have a long discussion about all these different things. We mentioned all these different ways of kind of controlling insulin levels. If you're only going to do one, count your carbohydrate. That gives you the most bang for the buck right there. Now, there's no such thing as carbohydrate deficiency. So, since carbohydrate's not an essential nutrient, and carbohydrates do significantly influence insulin, the fat storage hormone, then kind of if you're going to do one thing, count your carbohydrate, get it as low as possible. There's no such thing as carbohydrate deficiency, as sometimes people in the health profession like to tell you, but it's not true. It doesn't exist. So you can actually take it down to zero. Incredibly difficult to do that, but you could, and I'm not recommending you do that, but you really could. So if you're going to do one thing, count your carbohydrate. 2/3 of the population is carbohydrate sensitive. And close to 90 to 95% of my patient population is carbohydrate sensitive. Many of those people are also insulin resistant. It's kind of a stepping stone. Carbohydrate sensitivity, stepping stone, insulin resistance to diabetes type 2. So at least 2/3 of the population is carbohydrate sensitive, and that includes those diabetics, those insulin resistants, and then the rest of the population there. So 2/3 of the population is carbohydrate sensitive. My patient population, it's 90 to 95%. Now, what does that actually mean when I say that? Okay, what it means is that when you have even just a little bit of carbohydrate, you tend to get very large blood sugar swings with even a little bit of carbohydrate. What should happen in someone who's not so sensitive to carbohydrates, they can have a little bit of carbohydrate and their blood sugar only goes up a little bit and insulin level goes up a little bit, and subsequently then insulin levels only go up a little bit, and it only takes a small amount of insulin to keep those blood sugars nice and normal. Okay. If you're carbohydrate sensitive, what tends to happen is there's usually a delay, meaning that you tend to get this blood sugar that goes up some where the insulin should start kicking in, but it doesn't. And subsequently you get this huge blood sugar swing up. Now you get this big kick in of insulin that goes way up, and insulin really kicks in, and then the blood sugar tends to plummet. So you tend to get these great big blood sugar swings, and the insulin's chasing it around all day. And blood sugar swings tend to cause symptoms, headaches, irritability. I feel shaky. I have to lay down for a little while. I feel kind of clammy. I'm not thinking clearly. I've got to eat something right this second. Very common symptoms that occur not when blood sugars go up, but when blood sugars fall. And the symptoms occur due to the speed of the fall, because you get this big surge of insulin. Now the blood sugars plummet. It's the speed of the fall that causes symptoms, but it's also the weight gain then that goes with it. Blood sugar swings, symptoms, weight gain. Weight gain comes from, again, blood sugar swing up. Now you get a huge insulin swing up. Insulin again turns on fat storage. So you get symptoms, you get weight gain. So the treatment there is don't get the up. If you don't get the rise up, you don't get the fall. Actually, fasting people, if you want to call starving people that aren't eating, keep their blood sugars rock stable. So like starvation, if you're truly starving, fasting, your blood sugars even out. They're perfect. They're perfect. They work great. It's only when we start eating that things get thrown in a whack. And it's mainly the carbohydrate that really throws them out of whack. All right. Again, a little commercial break with all this. So I throw this slide up here because I do like people to think about this for a second. And many people, and clinicians, physicians, dietitians, don't understand this. And it's probably because they really haven't thought about it, because the concept's actually very straightforward. When we talk about someone's blood sugar, if we talk about your blood sugar, we say, what if we say your blood sugar is 100, which is really the absolute highest end of, quote, normal. Ideal ranges is really kind of at 65 to 75 to 85 range, kind of in there. That's where we want to be. But say your blood sugar is 100. We're going to use 100 because it's a nice round number. And it's not too high. And it's kind of the very top end of normal. So when we say that your blood sugar is 100, what does that actually mean? Okay, outside of, hey, it's a number. What does that actually mean as to how much sugar is in your blood? Well, it's only a tiny amount. If you do the math, we each have about 5 liters of blood. That's an estimate, but each of us has about 5 liters of blood in us. So if we say your blood sugar is 100, how much sugar is actually in your entire bloodstream? Well, it's 5 grams. 5 grams. 5 grams is a minuscule amount. It's the amount that's in a sugar cube. So, nobody sees sugar cubes nowadays, but when I was growing up, they had sugar cubes. Okay? 5 grams, 1 sugar cube in your entire bloodstream. That's it. So the point here being is that if you're sensitive to carbohydrates, it only takes a tiny amount to get a blood sugar swing. So literally, if your blood sugar is 100, and you have 5 grams of carbohydrate, which is half an Oreo, a Triscuit, a fifth of a banana, a quarter of an apple, about a quarter of a slice of bread. So you have one of those things, 5 grams, which is a tiny amount. You potentially are doubling your blood sugar. I'm going to say that again, because it's a very important concept. We're talking about tiny things, small amounts that can actually have great big implications in your health. So when we walk by we grab a little, just 3 M&Ms, or, I just had 1 cookie. Half an Oreo was going to double your blood sugar, literally. So you have only 5 grams if your blood sugar is normal. If your blood sugar is 80, which is like perfect, there's only 4 grams. Okay, and literally you ate a cube of sugar. Literally, you just more than doubled your blood sugar. The point there being is that if you're sensitive to carbohydrates, which 2/3 of the population is, it only takes tiny amounts to throw this way out of whack. Turn on fat storage. Turn on all these other health problems, potentially make them worse. We're talking tiny amounts here. So the point there is, these little things do matter. All right, back to where we were. Okay, the core of the eating plan. Core of the eating plan then is this is what you ought to concentrate on. This is an oversimplification. Again, the best food has absolutely no labels. We produce it. It'd be nice if we produce it ourselves, but we fix it ourselves. We get it from the outside of the grocery store in the fresh aisle. It's the whole food, all that stuff. Best food has no labels. And you eat just 3 things. Hydration. Water's the best thing to drink. Get rid of most everything else. We die in a couple days without water. Okay, so drink plenty of water. There's number 1. Number 2, good protein sources. We die without protein. It would just take you a year and a half to do it. That's all. But you die without protein. Okay? So the best protein sources from food are meat, seafood, cheese, and egg, which are basically very good protein sources with pretty much 0 carbohydrate. Okay? So good protein sources. And this isn't it shouldn't be high protein. This should be adequate protein. When I talk about protein, I'm not going to get too much into protein, but protein also increases insulin levels, just not quite as dramatically as carbohydrate. So it's not high protein. So high protein typically makes insulin levels go up significantly. You want adequate protein. When I say adequate protein, the whole concept is preserving lean body mass again. It's preserving lean body mass to keep your metabolism decent. The exercise helps with that, but also preserving lean body mass takes a protein to do that. Okay, again, meat, seafood, cheese, and add your best protein sources. And then filling in with vegetable salad stuff. And these, again, unprocessed food. Nobody ever gained 100 pounds by eating too much broccoli or too much cauliflower or too much spinach. It's like, no, I don't think that's ever happened. I wish someone would show me it. Yeah, this guy gained 100 pounds because he just kept eating broccoli. He ate it all the time and he gained so much weight. Never happened. The bottom line is, colorful vegetable salad stuff, they're good. Low calorie. They're nutrient dense. A lot of good vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients in them. And they're fairly low carbohydrate. And they're non-processed. So if it falls, that's the core of the eating plan. 3 things: hydration, good protein sources, vegetable salad stuff. If it falls outside the core, don't eat it. There you have it. That was it. Easier said than done, I realize. Concept simple, not easy to do. So the other end of the spectrum then is, okay, what about the carbohydrate, the processed carbohydrates that you want to avoid? So this is the simplified version of what I'll call the low carb diet simplified. LCDS is low carb diet simplified. So it's really the opposite end of the spectrum from the core. The core, again, hydration, good protein sources, vegetable salad stuff. The other end of the spectrum is also just 3 things: the starches, the crumbly carbs, and be careful with fruit. The nice thing about fruit, it should be whole fruit if you're going to have any, but be really careful with fruit. I'll finish that thought right now. Is that fruit can be the downfall of many weight loss plans, not because it's not healthy, because it does tend to have a lot of sugar in it. Okay? It may be natural sugar, but it doesn't matter. Fruit has a lot of sugar in it, and so subsequently then it can turn off weight loss because it can affect insulin levels. Okay, again, all right. So what you have to wrap your head around. Again, I digress. If you have to wrap your head around is eating healthy does not correlate with weight loss. They're 2 different things, completely 2 different things. Eating healthy, losing weight, 2 different things. All right, so avoid these 3 things: starches, crumbly carbohydrates, careful with fruit. Okay, the starches, what are they? Potato, rice, pasta, bread, corn. Okay, and you really want to avoid the processed these. And if you're going to have some, it should be the whole unprocessed bit. So keep it to an absolute minimum. All right. And then also the crumbly carbs, which really are the very processed carbohydrates, what I call the 6 C's: chips, cookies, crackers, cereal, including hot cereal, cake, and candy. Again, hot cereal, kind of the grits, the oatmeals, and all that. Typically in this day and age, they're all very, very processed. So all these things are very processed: chips, cookies, crackers, cereal, cake, and candy. 6 C's. Very processed, get rid of them. They're not going to help you. So, simple to understand, not easy to do. But, core of the eating plan, low carb diet simplified. Okay. Review them, learn them, put them up also on the refrigerator. So, believe it or not, we're winding down here. So I'm going to give you what I'm going to call the basic health strategies. If you're kind of starting the year off new, these are some basic health strategies that I encourage everybody to do. And I try to do these things myself. I can't say I'm perfect at them, but I try to do these things myself. And it's because I'm not willing to tell you to do something that I'm not willing to do. And it's, from the exercise part, the low carb stuff, the fasting part. I've been fasting for years. A little different discussion, which we could always go into. All right, so this is my basic health strategies to go by. The first is monitoring. Okay, the scale is the best monitor we have. Weigh yourself routinely. I encourage people to weigh themselves daily. Now, I know everybody else out there tells you, from your dietitian to your other physician or something, oh, don't weigh yourself every day because you don't want to, weight fluctuates up and down. And there are reasons that you don't want to be disappointed, have a good mood, bad mood. That's not the reason. Weigh yourself every day. Best time to weigh yourself is early in the morning. Get your most accurate weight. If you forget early in the morning, I'd tell you just wait till the next day. But get into the routine of weighing yourself every daily. Now, what's the reason? The reason is not to just look down at the number and go, oh, yay, or doggone poop. Why is it going up? The reason to weigh yourself every day is because you need to reflect on the past 24 hours. Is what did happen? What did you do differently? What occurred in this past 24 hours that's going to affect this weight today? It's relatively easy to look back on 24 hours and say, okay, what could it be that affected this weight today? It may be as simple as I didn't poop today. I had a little more salt yesterday. That can affect your weight. But very likely it can be those little things. Yeah, I did have 2 extra Oreos. I doubled my blood sugar. Yesterday insulin levels went up sky high for temporarily, turned on fat storage there, retained water. So it may have been, oh yeah, I did have a few extra snacks there that I grabbed at the office. Look back on 24 hours, because 24 hours is relatively simple to reflect back on. It's really difficult to look back on a week or 2 weeks. You're going to say to yourself in a week or 2 weeks that I did everything the same. I've done it all. We've been doing it the same way every day for the last few weeks. How come? How could this actually change? Reality is you did not do everything the same. But you'll think it because we have amnesia. Okay? But looking back on 24 hours, it's easier. And once you get in the habit of doing that, you're going to figure out that, okay, there are little things that really reflect on this number today. So when you look down at the number each morning, take a minute to reflect on why. What happened? What was different over the last 24 hours? You'll figure it out over time. And those little things matter. Okay, so that's first basic health strategy. Weigh yourself daily. If you're not, you need to ask yourself why you're not doing it. Eating. Okay, again, eat a small amount of good food slowly. That should be mantra. But think of how little can I eat and be satisfied, not how much can I cram in there. And everyone has a carbohydrate tipping point. For some people, it's way up here. Yeah, they can eat most anything you want to. But certainly the patients I'm seeing, that's not way up here. Everyone has a carbohydrate tipping point where they struggle. In the core of your eating plan, hydration, water's the best thing to drink. Okay, or if not drinking water, I'll take that a step further, then it needs to be natural, it shouldn't have artificial sweeteners, should not have artificial flavors. Certainly, so people talk about, gee, I'll just have 0 calorie, but I'll have, there's very good evidence that diet sodas will make you gain weight. And it's not the calories, it's because there is a significant insulin response to that. And they're right, it's not that it affects your calories. It's not that it affects your blood sugar necessarily. It's what does it do to insulin? That's the real question. Protein and fat, there's no carbohydrates, so your blood sugars don't go up a whole lot. It's like, no, it's the insulin effect. That's the effect we're trying to get. And yes, artificial sweeteners will do this. Processed foods make this go up much more. It's the insulin effect. That's the key. So, hydration, good protein sources, vegetable salad stuff. That's the core of the eating plan. Exercise absolutely helps with controlling insulin levels. The more the intensity, the better off you are. One of the biggest mistakes or misconceptions about exercise is thinking you need to exercise longer. You don't need to exercise longer. You need to increase intensity, not duration. The more intense the exercise, you can actually shorten your exercise plan significantly. You can get a tremendous workout in 20 minutes. There's lots of examples out there, so I encourage you, look into that. Nobody has to go to the fitness center for an hour and a half. I mean, this stuff can be done at home in your own time in very short periods of time, but exercise is important. Quality rest and sleep, I mentioned that at the beginning, that brings down cortisol levels. If you have very poor sleep, quality, you typically are going to struggle. Control stress. Again, also, when stress is out of control, we struggle from a health perspective as well as a weight perspective. And that, it's not only that when I'm stressed, I eat more. I mean, there is a lot of that. But even if you weren't eating more, it really works against you. Okay. IF is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting can be a tremendous addition to any health plan. Now, didn't really get into the nuances of all that, but here's the big picture of the whole thing. I'll take a minute to say this. One, fasting is not starvation. They're two different things. Starvation is something forced on us that we don't choose to do, and we subsequently don't know when our next meal is coming from. Fasting is completely different. It's something we choose to do. We know when our next meal is coming. We just choose not to have it. Your body's response is completely different. The hormonal changes that occur with intermittent fasting actually all help to improve health, decrease weight. Again, insulin levels go down, but also growth hormone goes up, which again, I'm getting a little bit digressing off the target here, but the point there being is that intermittent fasting can be a great addition. Reality is we all fast. We go to sleep at night, we fast. It's the old Breck fast, okay? We're breaking our fast. So we all fast for what? 8, 10, 12 hours every day. Okay. World record for fasting is 382 days. So I don't think that you should be trying 382 days, but the point there being is that it actually can be done safely and for an extended period of time. Really, for any individual, the questions to answer with fasting is how long to do it at any one time, and then how often to do it. That's the questions to answer. And I can't answer that question for you, but you can figure it out. We can help you figure it out. Okay? And then finally, it's personal responsibility. Nobody can do this for you. You have to decide you're going to do this and then actually do it. Okay? It's nice to talk about it. It's nice to have support. It's nice to do it with a buddy. The buddy system works, or family, or whatever. But you have to do it. Nobody else can do it for you. All right. A few resources before I completely wind this down, but believe it or not, we're almost done. So I throw 3 books up there. The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living is a good kind of book about how this works, low carbohydrate, how it works. By Stephen Phinney and Jeff Volek. Stephen Phinney's a physician, PhD, and Jeff Volek's a researcher. Now he's at University of Ohio in Columbus, Ohio. But very smart guys who live this stuff and studied this stuff, something Dr. Phinney for 30, 40 years now. And then they have a second book, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. A little bit different than that first book, because this is actually looking at kind of how you can actually improve athletic performance with low carb, which was kind of, thinking 15 years ago. So, that'd be craziness to be low carb. You need to be carb loading, right? No, you don't. You can actually improve athletic performance. And then finally, because I've mentioned fasting multiple times in there, very good book, and someone else who kind of lives this stuff is Dr. Jason Fung's book, The Complete Guide to Fasting. Very good book. You can get it on Amazon. All these books you can get on Amazon, and for a few bucks, download them to your reader. You can find them or get them ordered if you like the hard copies, which I still sometimes like to do that myself. All right, so Complete Guide to Fasting, Dr. Jason Fung, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. Very good. Now, if you think of questions, I encourage you, just pick up the phone and call the office, or, put it on, if you're seeing us on our Facebook or YouTube site, just don't hesitate to send us an email. The email is actually success@cfws.com, Center for Weight Loss Success. So the website there, it's up there, kind of www.cfws.com, Center for Weight Loss Success. So cfws.com. Phone number 757-873-1880. If you're contemplating surgery, hey, this is what we do. A lot of this, though, is very pertinent for anyone. And I'll digress again here for a minute because I can. Is that often people will come into me and say, gee, I don't know if surgery is right for me because I don't eat very much. It's like, well, I don't eat very much, and therefore just cutting, surgery, yes, we decrease the size of your stomach and literally you can't eat very much, but there's actually more that occurs during surgery than just a smaller stomach, in that there are some of these hormonal changes, and ghrelin levels go down, incretin levels can go down, which then helps with, again, controlling insulin levels. So there are other things that occur, not just that it's a smaller stomach. Okay, so anyway, if you have questions, I encourage you to pick up the phone, walk in the door. We do have a whole nutritional store. It's open to anybody. Come by and see us. All right. Thank you for listening. Hopefully this was helpful. I apologize for dragging on a lot longer than I thought I would, but this is important stuff. And this is kind of a big overview, an overview of kind of weight and health, which can be very important, and we can't ignore it. So again, controlling weight, controlling health long-term is controlling insulin levels. Again, thanks for listening. Again, this is Dr. Clark from the Center for Weight Loss Success. Love to hear from you. Take care. Have a good day.